The chalk scraped against the blackboard with a sound that made everyone's skin crawl. Mr. Harrison turned around, a twisted smile playing on his lips as he looked directly at 12-year-old Marcus Williams in the back row. "Let's see if you can solve this one, Mr. Williams," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Or is it too complex for someone like you?" The equation he'd written wasn't just difficult. It was deliberately impossible, or so he thought. What happened in the next 60 seconds would not only silence the entire classroom but would echo through the halls of Lincoln Middle School for decades to come. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this all began. Before we dive into this incredible story, if you love tales of justice, resilience, and powerful life lessons, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's get back to Marcus. It was a gray October morning in 2019 when Marcus Williams walked into his new school. His family had just moved to this Connecticut suburb after his mother got a job at the local hospital. Marcus was nervous. New school, new faces, new everything. But he had one secret weapon that always helped him feel confident: mathematics. Ever since he was 5 years old, Marcus had been obsessed with numbers. While other kids played video games, Marcus would sit with his grandfather, a retired engineer, solving puzzles and learning about mathematical principles. His grandfather would always say, "Marcus, numbers don't lie. They don't care what you look like, where you come from, or what anyone thinks of you. 2 plus 2 is always 4, no matter who's doing the adding." Those words had become Marcus's anchor. His first 3 classes went smoothly enough. Some curious glances, a few friendly smiles, but nothing unusual. Then came 4th period, advanced mathematics with Mr. Richard Harrison. Mr. Harrison had been teaching at Lincoln Middle School for 15 years. He was known for 2 things: his brilliant mathematical mind and his inexplicable hostility towards certain students. Parents had complained. Students had whispered. But somehow, he remained untouchable, protected by tenure and a principal who turned a blind eye. When Marcus walked into the classroom, Mr. Harrison's eyes followed him with an intensity that made Marcus's stomach twist. He could feel it, that familiar, sickening feeling he'd hoped he'd left behind at his old school. "Take a seat in the back," Mr. Harrison said flatly, not even checking his roster for Marcus's name. The first week was subtle. A dismissed hand raise here. A sarcastic comment there. "Are you sure you're in the right class, Mr. Williams?" But by the second week, Mr. Harrison's treatment of Marcus had become impossible to ignore. He would call on Marcus only to give him the most difficult problems, then cut him off mid-answer with a condescending, "Never mind, let's have someone capable solve this." He questioned every correct answer Marcus gave, as if looking for a reason to mark it wrong. He would make pointed remarks about certain students being in over their heads. Marcus's classmates noticed. Some felt uncomfortable, but said nothing. A few, like Sarah Chen and David Rodriguez, tried to befriend Marcus, sitting with him at lunch and offering quiet support. But in Mr. Harrison's classroom, everyone was afraid to speak up. The tension built for 3 weeks until that fateful Friday afternoon. The class had been working on quadratic equations, nothing Marcus couldn't handle. He'd actually finished the entire problem set in 15 minutes and sat quietly, reviewing his work. That's when Mr. Harrison noticed. "Finished already, Mr. Williams?" The question hung in the air like a threat. My, either you're a mathematical genius or you've simply written down random numbers hoping for the best. A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the classroom. "Why don't you come up to the board?" Mr. Harrison continued, his voice taking on a theatrical quality that made Marcus's heart race. "Let's give you a real challenge. Something that will separate the truly gifted from the pretenders." Marcus's hands were shaking as he walked to the front. He could feel every eye in the room on him. Sarah gave him an encouraging nod, but it did little to calm his nerves. Mr. Harrison picked up the chalk and began writing, his movements deliberate and slow. He wrote out a problem on the board that made the entire classroom go silent. This wasn't an 8th grade problem. This was a university-level calculus problem, something that required knowledge of advanced techniques that students wouldn't encounter until their 2nd or 3rd year of college mathematics. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Williams, Mr. Harrison said, crossing his arms. Unless you'd like to admit that perhaps you're not quite as talented as you think you are. That maybe you've been in over your head this whole time. That maybe I'll solve it, Marcus said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Harrison's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? I said I'll solve it. This time Marcus's voice was stronger, steadier. Something his grandfather once told him echoed in his mind. When someone tries to make you small, that's when you show them exactly how tall you can stand. Marcus stared at the problem for what felt like an eternity but was only about 10 seconds. The classroom was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Then something clicked. His grandfather had shown him this problem. Not directly, but they'd discussed the techniques needed to solve it during one of their Sunday morning mathematics sessions. His grandfather had been working through an old textbook, and teenage Marcus had been curious. They'd spent 3 hours that day exploring the beauty of advanced calculus. Marcus picked up the chalk and his hand stopped shaking. He began to write, his movements becoming more confident with each line. He worked through the problem step by systematic step, demonstrating the proof with a clarity that would have impressed a university professor. The classroom remained frozen in stunned silence. But Marcus wasn't finished. As he wrote the final line confirming the answer, he turned to face Mr. Harrison and said something that would become legend at Lincoln Middle School. The mathematician Leonard Euler first proved this in 1729. It's one of the most beautiful results in all of calculus. My grandfather taught me that mathematics is beautiful because it's true for everyone, Mr. Harrison. It doesn't matter who solves it, the answer is always the same. Numbers don't see color. Maybe people should learn from numbers. The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Harrison's face cycled through emotions, shock, disbelief, anger, and then something that looked almost like fear. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. For the first time in his 15-year career at Lincoln Middle School, Richard Harrison was speechless. Then from the back of the room, someone started clapping. It was Sarah Chen. Within seconds, David joined her. Then another student and another until the entire classroom erupted in applause. Mr. Harrison stood frozen, his carefully constructed facade of superiority crumbling before everyone's eyes. That afternoon, 3 things happened in rapid succession. First, Sarah Chen pulled out her phone. She'd recorded the entire exchange. By the time the final bell rang, the video had been shared with the principal, the school board, and several parents. Second, David Rodriguez's mother, who happened to be a civil rights attorney, made a phone call that would launch a formal investigation into Mr. Harrison's conduct and the administration's failure to act on previous complaints. Third, Marcus's grandfather received a call from his grandson telling him what had happened. The old man wept with pride, then immediately called his former colleague, a professor at MIT who had been asking him for years if he knew any promising young mathematical minds. By Monday morning, Mr. Harrison had been suspended pending investigation. By the end of the month, he would quietly resign, his teaching career effectively over. The principal who had protected him would face a formal review, and the school district would implement new anti-discrimination training and oversight procedures. But the real story, the one that matters most, is what happened to Marcus. The video of him solving that impossible problem went viral not just locally but nationally. News outlets picked it up. Mathematics educators shared it as an example of the importance of nurturing talent in all students. Within weeks, Marcus received dozens of messages from mathematicians, educators, and students who had been inspired by his courage. The MIT professor his grandfather knew offered Marcus a place in a special summer program for gifted young mathematicians. He accepted, and over the next few years, Marcus would thrive in environments that celebrated his talents rather than diminishing them. But perhaps more importantly, something shifted at Lincoln Middle School. Students who had been silent witnesses found their voices. Sarah and David became activists for equity in education, starting a student-led diversity committee. Teachers who had been uncomfortable with Mr. Harrison's behavior but afraid to speak up began advocating for change. One equation had done more than just solve a mathematical problem, it had solved a human one. 5 years later, Marcus Williams would give a TED Talk during his senior year of high school, right before leaving for MIT on a full scholarship. In it, he would say something profound. That day in Mr. Harrison's classroom, I learned something more valuable than how to solve an advanced calculus problem. I learned that the answer to prejudice isn't anger, it's excellence. When someone tries to give you an impossible problem hoping you'll fail, you solve it anyway. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. You show them that their limitations exist only in their minds, not in your potential. But here's the thing that took me longer to understand. I was lucky. I had a grandfather who taught me. I had friends who stood up for me. I had a skill that was undeniable in that moment. Not everyone does. And that's why we can't just celebrate individual victories. We have to change the systems that create these challenges in the first place. Mr. Harrison gave me an impossible problem that day. I solved it. But the really impossible problem, the one that takes all of us working together, is creating a world where no kid has to prove their worth on a blackboard to be treated with dignity. The story of Marcus Williams and the equation that changed everything reminds us that power comes in many forms. Sometimes it's the power of knowledge. Sometimes it's the power of courage. And sometimes it's the power of standing tall when someone tries to make you feel small. Marcus didn't just solve a mathematical problem that day. He solved a human one. He showed an entire school that excellence can't be diminished by prejudice, that talent doesn't have a color, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is pick up a piece of chalk and prove that you belong exactly where you are. Numbers don't lie. 2 plus 2 is always 4, no matter who's doing the adding. And talent, when given the chance to shine, illuminates not just the person who possesses it, but everyone around them. If this story moved you, inspired you, or taught you something valuable, smash that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling us about a time you or someone you know overcame adversity with grace and excellence.